Uber has spawned tension with taxi drivers the world over, and the latest country to be caught up in the conflict is France. Thousands of taxi drivers across France blocked access to Paris's main airports and had thrown up barricades on the roads last week. They were protesting unfair competition, and they fear they would lose their jobs to fast-growing Uber. While the tension between Uber and taxi drivers in Paris is red hot, it's a different story in Washington, D.C. The government there has successfully resolved its own Uber issue.
Last year here in Washington, D.C., Uber made an appearance and there were clashes with taxi drivers. But D.C. governments decided they'd try to solve the problem with legislation and rules. And now, both Uber and taxi cab drivers coexist.
The Council of Governments strives to improve transportation for residents in the Washington, D.C. area. An expert there says the conflict can be resolved.
First and foremost, Uber set up shop along with some of the other providers. Lyft is one of the other ones, without really going through any of the regulatory processes that you need to go through. And that caught the attention of not only the taxi cab drivers, but also the DC Taxi Cab Commission, as well as in Virginia it was the DMV, and then in Maryland it was the Public Utilities Commission. And so early on what happened is that there was an unlevel playing field. Eventually legislation was passed by the DC City Council to essentially require Uber to provide certain things such as insurance documentation. There also needs to be background checks for the drivers, and this all really comes down to a safety issue and whether or not these services are safe. I think the biggest issue was that a lot of these Uber drivers or Lyft drivers, they were allowing for hailing of their services. So if you just happen to be walking down the street and you saw one of these vehicles, I think with Lyft they have the pink mustaches, and with Uber they have signs on the vehicles, you're able to hail those services. That was the biggest complaint of the taxi cab. My advice to those folks would be to have that dialogue, figure out how you can coexist, and it'll work out, because there are going to be certain segments of the population that aren't, Uber's not going to appeal to them, and Lyft isn't going to appeal to them, and they're still going to want that cab ride.